you're doing to me. Can't you see it would take just a lot to pry open your world?
Movie. This time it's no better to talk about one of the best movies that came out in 90s history, and that is Tommy Boy and Black Sheep. These two are always compared together. They're always saying, well, which Chris Farley and David Spade movie is the best to you? Well, here are my choices, and here are my reasons for going for it. So let's get things started, and let's start versing this shit. Ready? Tommy Boy versus Black Sheep. Let's hit it. Now we're going to dive into which film has the better story. The heart, basically. Which film has it? There is Tommy Boy, which is basically, slow-witted, dumb Tommy, who basically is a college graduate who got a C+, who was into college for about 7 years. His dad dies, and it's up to him to save the company. Then there is Black Sheep, who basically Mike Donnelly and his brother is trying to run for governor of that town, or Washington, and he's trying his damnedest to help the campaign, but they're trying to keep him away from it. Which story was done better? And we're going to get into that right now. Well, let's look at Tommy Boy's first, obviously, since it came out first. Tommy Boy's was really well done. Now, there are a few hiccups in it, but those are very few and far between. In fact, I had heard that the original script was going to be more about Chris Farley and Rob Lowe trying to join together as, two brothers who, brothers by marriage, who were basically helping to try to save, one stepfather and one father and mother, yada, 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 their company together. But everyone's seen Spade's and Chris's chemistry, and they're like, holy shit, this works so much better. And it's true. It is magical. This story is very, I've got to say, impressive, interesting, and it does keep you hooked the entire way through. It has a lot of heart to it. After the scenes where his dad dies and etc. Now, I will say, these were the scenes where it flip-flops a little bit. When Tommy's dad dies, it just feels really forced. I mean, I know this is 90s plot writing here, but there are movies in the 90s that were made that have done death scenes like this better. And on top of that, the antagonists, etc., aren't so well done. I mean, they get married, and right at the wedding, Tommy's dad dies. And that's when he's got to worry about saving the car company and the brake pads and everything. It's kind of nuts, if you ask me. It's just right there. It's a little unbelievable. But shortly after that one scene, or those little tidbits, the story flows quite naturally. And it comes out strong, too. If it wasn't for that one scene, I would say this would be an excellent 9 or 10 out of 10 film. But yeah, the whole thing where the dad dies at the wedding is a little ridiculous. But here it's the journey. It's a road trip film, too. Which, both of the films that I'm talking about today are road trip films. And have a very similar premise. This one definitely has more of a premise to it, that road trip feel that kind of gathers and kind of keeps moving forward. I think it's quite interesting, and it's just told concisely well, other than the wedding part. Other than that, everything just kind of flows. A lot of the times where they're stopping and trying to make brake pad sales just kind of cracks me up. There is basically scenes where they hit deers, they try to talk to customers, the sales go from really, really bad to really incredible, and they always keep the chemistry going. And the film can be extremely heartwarming once you're dealing with the death of a character, and it does explain grief really well. And sort of like a Happy Gilmore sort of way of explaining grief. it goes from being kind of dark, but the way that Chris Farley himself, or the character Tommy, deals with grief is honestly interesting. He uses comedy as more of a coping mechanism, like where he is sitting on the boat with Michelle, and they're just talking about his dad, and he just makes the joke about his dad, "Hey, quit playing with your dinghy." That is just funny. And I kind of relate to it more because when my grandfather died, who was like a father to me, I used comedy as sort of a coping mechanism. I used the things that my grandfather would do that would make me laugh, that helped me deal with his death more so. And yeah, it just kind of really hits more at home. Now, let's flip over to Black Sheep. Black Sheep's story is a little kooky. It's a little all over the place, and it is definitely relying on more of the Spade and Farley comedy, but oddly enough, the two don't get to share as much screen time in this one as they do in Tommy Boy. So it does feel a little off. I mean, I've heard stories on Black Sheep itself saying that, well, the two would start just ranting and going off script and etc., that the director of the film wanted to keep them separate as much as possible. But, and I do say a big but, it does have its unique funny moments. And now let's get into the story of it. Al Donnelly is trying to run to be governor of Washington, and he's got to go up against the big bad governor herself, who is just played great here. And basically Mike is trying to help him run the campaign without screwing up, and they're trying to keep the two from screwing up as much. Personally, to me, I think it's a very simple and straightforward story. It's more or less relying on the comedy and the chemistry between the two even more heavily, and it doesn't have a whole lot of heart in it. Now, it has heart, some. It has some heart. There are some cute, emotional moments that I do really like, but it is lacking in the sort of heart that Tommy Boy has. So I kind of just feel off and on about this one. It's not enormously huge, but it still does enjoy, or at least warrant a viewing. But I do have sort of a confession to make. Now, as a teenager, I loved this film. In fact, I was the type that loved it even more so than Tommy Boy when I was a teen. But as I grow older, now that I'm, a man in his 30s, I feel like Tommy Boy is more of the better film when it comes to the story. So, it's off and on to me. I love the kooky zaniness of this film and how they're just trying to keep Mike away from the campaign and using David Spade's character to basically be the guide to keep him away. And I kind of think it's a little forced that they form this buddy-buddy friendship when basically this is the first time that the two have met, when in Tommy Boy you could actually tell that they have a history together and Tommy does consider Richard his friend, versus here where you could tell these two have just met, but it feels like they've known each other. I think they were trying to do Tommy Boy 2 here so much, and they were trying to capitalize off that film's popularity, and you could really see that here. So I'm going to say gently and, as nicely as possible, the winner of the story round is going to go straight to Tommy Boy. As crazy as that sounds, well, it probably doesn't sound too crazy. I mean, both films have their great story elements that are just enjoyable, fun to watch, and there's always something special in each one, but Tommy Boy just has a lot more of an arc to it than Black Sheep does. So the winner of the story round is Tommy Boy. Let's go on to the next segment, shall we? I was going to break this up into characters, but I'm going to do this into two segments: main characters and side characters. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because both of these films have very memorable and stand out, ish side characters that I really, really like. And they both have something special to it. So let's go into the main characters bracket here. We have Tommy Callahan, played by the always overly talented Chris Farley. Richard Hayden, who is played by David Spade. So let's look into that first before we get into the Black Sheep versions, who's Mike Donnelly and Steve Dodds. So let's go into that. And I'm going to go with the entire main cast group here too. Tim Mathis and everyone else will be talked about here as well. Then I'll go into the side cameo characters. Now, a lot of people will look at basically Tommy Callahan, Richard Hayden, Mike Donnelly, and Steve Dodds and say, well, they're the same exact characters. No, there are some general differences between these four, but they're very subtle, and you have to really have seen the movies a million times to sort of notice it. Me, I've seen it 1,000,001, so I consider myself an expert when it comes to noticing the differentiation of these characters. But yeah, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. They are very, very similar, and it is hard to spot the differences. You have the well-meaning and big-hearted character, that's Tommy/Mike. Then we have the sarcastic asshole character, that's Steve and Richard. So, which versions of these guys do it better? And of course, I'm going to talk about the other characters too, including the antagonist. Now, let's go with this. Tommy himself is a goof. He is a big college dropout guy who is basically living in his dad's shadow. I can't believe I can explain such a big critique of this character from a Chris Farley standpoint. But yeah, he's crazy. He is the basic stereotype of the college guy. He's very similar to characters from, say, Animal House or Meatballs or that big party animal college guy. But after his dad dies, he has to learn to grow up and start being a man and taking care of the company. He grows a heart and he becomes more stable in the business sense. Then there is his other counterpart, Mike Donnelly, who is basically similar, but also there's a big difference between the two. Mike doesn't start out as the big party animal type college dropout guy, the big fat, make jokes about him and everything. No, he comes off as well-meaning. He already has this heart formed. He loves, respects, and cares deeply about his brother. And he wants nothing more than his brother to win. He puts his brother's needs and other people's needs before his own. In fact, there's also a scene where Mike sees a bunch of kids drinking, stealing whiskey, or I think it was whiskey or vodka. And Mike basically goes over there, and when I first watched it, I thought he was just drinking and enjoying it and hanging out with them too. But I had to really keep my eye on it. Because I didn't hear it the first time I watched it, he breaks the bottle so the kids don't drink it. He drank it and etc. And yeah, I thought that was actually kind of cool. It does show a difference in characters played by the same actor. It's not exactly the same at all. I do kind of like that he's already starting off as well-meaning. He's just kind of dopey-eyed and kind of silly, which so is Tommy. And a lot of people say, well, it's basically the same character, when no, it's really not basically the same character. Although I will say that most of the things that happen to him are just upright hilarious. Like, my favorite part of the movie itself is where he is just being dragged on the elderly couple's car because his tie got caught in the trunk. I do laugh hard at that. There's a lot of slapstick with these characters, though. I mean, Tommy Boy didn't focus much on the slapstick, but I'm not getting into the comedy section just yet. I'm getting into characters. But there are a big difference. Mike isn't so much of the party animal type like Tommy was. Mike's already grown into sort of the go-getter, wants to do everything he can to help out. That's the kind of guy. And he already has a strong relationship with, say, the kids that run the community center, and he's nice to the new kid. Although I do feel like some of those relationships are kind of forced, and they do put Mike in some awkward situations. The scene with the bunny ears was just kind of dumb. But they try to give him more heart when he's already got heart. Unfortunately, there is no arc for Mike as there's an arc for Tommy. So it's basically the same character who doesn't learn any lessons as the film goes on like Tommy does. And he's one giant Family Guy character, if you think about it. I mean, he's well-meaning, he's nice, and he's kind of already cool already. So he doesn't really change throughout the movie. He's the same as he started. Maybe he's a little smarter than he was, and he does try to fight with the conspiracy against his brother, but other than that, he doesn't change. There's no arc here. Well, let's move on to David Spade's character, Richard and Steve. Now, I will be more forgiving on this one. These two are basically the same characters. There's really not much of a difference. Though I will say Richard himself does have more of an arc than Steve. Steve is basically there for a paycheck, and Richard is there against his will in Tommy Boy. So let's move on with David Spade's character. The acting, though, is pretty much the same here. And like I said, his arc in Tommy Boy is just so much better. It's more fulfilling. He goes from being more of despising Tommy or being greatly annoyed by him, with his regular David Spade quips about, oh, you have a window, why shouldn't you? Yada, yada, yada. His sarcastic lines. Richard is like my spirit animal, so I do memorize almost all his lines throughout the movie. He's my favorite character out of the film. I can't help it. And he does grow from being the guy who doesn't want to be there to actually forming a strong bond and friendship with Tommy, which Tommy at that point had already considered him a friend or the guy that he picked on. However, in Black Sheep, there's really no arc. The two already seem like friends, even though they have just met at that point in time, and they stay together in the cabin. The cabin scenes are the best part of Black Sheep, by the way. I know I'm going off course. Well, Steve doesn't change either. He's basically just there to collect a paycheck. And to get some things done in political favors for himself to get more popular, I guess. They really didn't go forward with this character. They just kind of wanted David Spade to spend more time with Chris Farley so they could have scenes together. They could have already had the guys working together at some point. They could say that he's already working on the campaign. But I will say the characters are almost the same, except Richard does grow and become more loving and more humble towards Tommy. And I do like that. Now there's the other characters, the villains of this. There's the governor herself from Black Sheep, and also there is Rob Lowe from Tommy Boy, and Bo Derek. Well, honestly, the villain categories are not these films' strong suit, and I am inclined to agree here. Paul from Tommy Boy is pretty interesting as a villain, while the governor herself, she's just fun. I do love her personality in this one. The villains are actually way better done in Black Sheep, surprisingly, than Tommy Boy. Now, I'm saying the main villains, not the side villains. These guys from Black Sheep are just a lot more fun. I mean, I love her attitude and how hilarious that she could actually be. She's over the top, and she works alongside Bruce McGill. I mean, I think she has some of the best lines. One of my favorite lines from her being, are you done? Is that tea sweet enough for you, or is this some kind of science experiment? I just love how crazy and over the top they had her be. Rob Lowe, unfortunately, is very limited in this role, and I think it was because he was in the middle of filming something else. I don't even think he got credited in Tommy Boy, unfortunately. He was busy filming something else at the time. I think it was The Stand. I could be wrong on this. But yeah, his performance is very stunted. He's just kind of the douchebag, stepbrother / bad guy, generic. And he didn't really give much to Tommy Boy. And the focus really isn't on him as much as, say... Really, he's more of a prop than he is a villain. And then we're going to go with Bo Derek's performance. I think her name is Beverly. And yeah, I just really wasn't impressed with her either. She's just there to wear her swimsuit. And that way we could get reference to her film 10. Which, yeah, they do that in Tommy Boy. The villains are not Tommy Boy's strong suit. Well, the main antagonists are not Tommy Boy's strong suit. However, Black Sheep's strong suit is the villains. They are just so much fun. I do love the governor's performance. Well, ex-governor now. And the fact that she used the election proceedings to cheat by voting with dead people... I actually really like that. Boy, that's kind of relevant today, isn't it? Huh? Okay, political jokes aside, I do find Black Sheep's villains are just a little better, but going outward, we're going to keep going into the character rage. There's also, Al Donnelly, the governor, and then there's, side characters, and then there's also the character from... Tommy's dad. He's good in this too. Tommy's dad was great, but he didn't get much screen time. The same kind of happens with Tim Mathis' character, Al Donnelly. They don't really get much screen time, and that is unfortunate because there could have been something much more. Rob Lowe doesn't get much screen time, and Tommy Boy. But if I'm gonna rate all the characters and versus the two movies as a whole, I'm going to have to give it to Tommy Boy itself. Oh, another point for Tommy Boy on the main character-wise. But we're not done. These were main characters. We're going to the side characters now. Let's roll. The side characters. The cameos, as I call it. Okay, first we'll look at Tommy Boy's side characters. And, well, we're just going to look at the one or two. There are the people that he is trying to... sell the brake pads to. They were all fun. People in the restaurant. I do love most of the cameos. Everybody at the plants were great too. Even though they are basically only in it for a few scenes. We have Michelle, who is definitely a side character. But let's look at the side villains. Ray Zielinski, played by the irreplaceable, unbelievable Dan Aykroyd. Oh my god, I love this guy. Now, I consider him not really a villain, but he is a side character, and his cameo is probably the best part out of Tommy Boy to me. Because, I'm a big Dan Aykroyd fanboy, and anytime he was on screen, I even have a Zielinski Auto Parts shirt that's from this film that was released in 1995. It was my grandfather's. I still have that shirt. It's hanging in my closet somewhere. But yeah, Ray Zielinski was a Chad, and I just loved how he was able to basically pick up Paul's wife and just like, oh yeah, I know you're a criminal, but I'm kind of a little hungry. Let's go. I think most of his lines were just flat out amazing, and being read with Dan Aykroyd's iconic voice actually made them even funnier. I mean, one of my favorite little bits of dialogue is him saying that, oh, well, get a bucket of ice to ice down the marbles. Oh man. He speaks with a very interesting way of talking that makes the film or any character he plays so much fun and enjoyable and enduring. It's the best cameo out of the whole movie. The other cameo characters are fun too, but let's look at Black Sheep's cameo characters. We've got Bruce McGill's character, who is unfortunately just there when it comes down to it. He is kind of her lackey. I mean, also Al Donnelly himself has a lackey too in this film, but it's not anywhere as memorable as Bruce McGill's. But that's not the cameos I want to focus on. The big cameo has to go to freaking Gary Busey. Yeah, if anyone could rival the cameo of Tommy Boys with Dan Aykroyd, it's Gary Busey. I love this dude. I freaking love Gary Busey in this film. I think he might be the reason I watch Black Sheep a lot. And I don't know, every time I see this guy on screen, like from the moment he talks, it just cracks me the hell up. I mean, he's just like, oh, I could go to your mama's and start a small fire in her panties. I mean, just, oh man, I laugh so hard. And the comedy just kind of keeps on going. A lot of it hinges on between him and Spade. I mean, once Chris Farley's character shows up, Mike shows up and kind of saves the day. His character does kind of lose a little bit of interest, but just a little bit. I liked seeing crazy Gary Busey freaking people out, grabbing David Spade and getting in his face, shooting the car, stealing the car. Oh man, it's just hard to pick between the cameos of both films here. And if I have to pick between the cameo characters, I'm gonna rate them all as a whole. I'm gonna have to give the point to Tommy Boy. As hard as it was for me to say, I really like both sets of characters in both films. That is the main cast and the side cast. I like them both, but Tommy Boy does them a little better. I mean, look at Dan Aykroyd's characterization. Look at him. Look at the way he speaks and talks and how cool he is. I mean, you can see he is definitely an all-business man. And that's one thing I really like about his character. While there's Gary Busey, who's the best cameo out of Black Sheep, who is just flat out batshit nuts. But if I have to pick one, I am going to go with Dan Aykroyd's cameo. It saves the films. So in the character rounds, Tommy Boy again is the winner. Let's move on to the next segment, shall we? Now here is the strong part. The comedy. Which movie does comedy a little better? There's Tommy Boy, which is a very straightforward comedy, but it does have its little wacky moments, and Black Sheep, which is 95% wacky moments. So, but which film does it better? Well, let's look at the prospects of it. Which one is more quotable to people? Well, I've got to say, Tommy Boy is definitely a lot more quotable. Every time I quote it to anyone, you say something like along the lines of Herbie Hancock. Somebody is definitely going to know what the hell you're talking about. But if I try to quote a line from Black Sheep, unfortunately, a lot of people are just going to be like, oh, I didn't watch that one. Or, oh, yeah, that's the other Chris Farley and David Spade movie, which is kind of unfair. The comedy is definitely a lot more straightforward in Tommy Boy, and that's where the belly laughs kind of fall flat for me a little bit. Oh my god, I said something negative about Tommy Boy? Well, it's not really a negative critique. It's more of this movie was trying to take itself a little more seriously than an SNL sketch, and yeah, that's what this one did. It took itself seriously, but there were scenes that were a little too serious and scenes that didn't make sense. As I said, Tommy's dad's death, which was just really forced. It shows that these guys are more better or attuned at writing comedy than they are serious drama. But they do try to cut back on the jokes a little more in Tommy Boy than Black Sheep. Black Sheep definitely has comedy stamped all over it, but I'm just gonna say it's fucking hilarious, the comedy that they give us. Farley, throughout the movie, is constantly getting hurt, falling down, it's like Three Stooges on steroids on how bad he gets hurt. He even goes to break the fourth wall at the time and says, when he falls down a giant dirt mountain, what in the hell was that all about? And, it's more of a physical comedy with this one. There isn't so much physical comedy in Tommy Boy. It's more of lines and quips, one-liners here and there, and some random moments, while this one is full random moments. If you remember the deer in Tommy Boy, how it breaks through the car and everyone freaks out, well, take that, put that in Black Sheep, and that is basically Black Sheep, but on maximum overdrive with its comedy. Constantly something is blowing up, they're getting high, or something is just ready to explode, fall, destroyed. It's amazing. The comedy is way more physical in Black Sheep than Tommy Boy, definitely. And I'm gonna sound a little crazy. Now, Tommy Boy is to be taken just a tad more seriously than Black Sheep. I mean, you do have moments where he's vacuuming. I mean, he's vacuuming moths. The car hood comes up and nearly wrecks them, crashes them in a semi. He forgets to take the oil can out. I laugh my ass off at both films. But Black Sheep takes those jokes and they put them in the shredder, inject steroids into them, and they pump you up with it. And they add just a touch of energy drink just for that concise comedic moments. But which does it better? Do I like the one-liners or the quips or insults from Tommy Boy that really do make the film memorable? Or do I prefer the over-the-top goofiness of Black Sheep? Well, if I'm going to rate comedy alone, Black Sheep does something much better than Tommy Boy. And that is definitely the slapstick comedy. In fact, the entire time that Mike and Steve are at the cabin is pure comedic gold. When they are stuck in that damn cabin and everything is falling apart and the bat and everything, holy shit, you cannot help but watch this film. In fact, a lot of times, this is my big confession, after the cabin scenes are done, I kind of just stop watching the movie when they start trying to get into that more serious political stuff, because I just don't care about the political stuff. While they're in that cabin, I mean, you could have written a sitcom off this with David Spade and Chris Farley, and I would have been happy with that. It takes The Great Outdoors, something of that nature, or say The Burbs, and they just doubly inject it. It's funny as hell. And yeah, I'm gonna say those moments in the cabin alone outshines Tommy Boy's comedy. And that might sound blasphemous to me, but Black Sheep does remember that it is a comedy film first and a story-driven film last, I guess is to say. It's not as heartfelt or as powerful as Tommy Boy, but man, when they hit you into that damn cabin, you can't help but laugh your ass off. And then the cameo characters do also help. The Opie convention line always does crack me up. And I do like David Spade's line of, thanks for not shoving the nozzle up my ass first. And then you hear them coming back. The scenes with Gary Busey, incredibly funny. So, yeah, I'm going into such a tangent here. Which one do I think is better at the comedy than the other? Well, I'm gonna have to say Black Sheep is just a little better. From the cabin scene alone. The cabin scene alone decimates Tommy Boy. I mean, it freaking destroys it with its comedic aspects. I could watch these two in that cabin all day long. I wish they would have made a sitcom out of this. It was that freaking good. But yeah, I'm giving the point to Black Sheep in this one when it comes to the comedic tones. Now, it seems like Tommy Boy might have won this, but let's go to my final thoughts. Well, here we are with my final thoughts of the films. Which one is the better movie? Well, obviously for my scoring board, you can see that Tommy Boy basically won this one, but I don't dislike Black Sheep or hate Black Sheep or anything like that, because I do like it and enjoy it too. In fact, I play one right after the other normally. That's how I like to watch them. I own both on Blu-ray. I mean, you've seen in my intro video, I have both of them on Blu-ray. I have a giant poster signed by David Spade of Black Sheep, so what does that tell you? I do like both these films, and I do find them to be essential 90s classic films. I honestly like to kick my feet up, watch them, and really enjoy them. You get a lot of comedic tones in both of them, but when it comes to story, characters, character development, Tommy Boy kind of just wins and destroys this film. And I think that will upset some people who are really big fans of Black Sheep, because Black Sheep does have a lot of memorable, fun stuff. But I do think that the biggest issue with this is that Black Sheep's timing. It came out not even a year later than Tommy Boy. Not even 1 year later. I don't even think there was but a few months later. You know what I mean? I don't even think it was a full-fledged year. So the timing of it was, people really loved Tommy Boy, and they really enjoyed the arcs that the characters went through. And it showed that Chris Farley himself could do some serious movies if he really wanted to. Unfortunately, when Black Sheep came out, it was back to the goofy, campy stuff. But ironically enough, Farley's character was trying to take the role, or Farley himself was trying to be serious in the role. Of course, other films that would later out to come would use really great work of Farley's comedic physical comedy too, and his facial expressions, such as Almost Heroes and Beverly Hills Ninja, which are just, to me, masterpieces of their time. Beverly Hills Ninja is underrated, and I might do a big retrospective of my favorite Chris Farley films ever, if I ever find the time to. But yeah, Tommy Boy basically decimated this film, and it's obvious that I'm very biased to it. Tommy Boy just has more heart. Tommy Boy just has more of an arc for the characters. You care what's happening to the characters. Black Sheep, unfortunately, feels more like a SNL sketch. And which is funny, the Tommy Boy was originally directed by an SNL director himself. But yeah, Tommy Boy feels more natural. It does have its little bit of a hiccup moments, just mainly one in particular. But other than that, the jokes are solid, the characters land better, and the story is more engaging. I know a lot of people that just turn off Black Sheep, or basically, if you watch some critic reviews of Roger and Ebert, I believe it was Ebert who said that he basically walked out of the film, not even finished it at the last 20 minutes. And I do kind of see that complaint. But I have nothing really against these films, Black Sheep itself. Black Sheep can be a decent film, and you put it on for a good laugh. If you're having a good day or a bad day or whatever, you can put Black Sheep on, have some pizza, drink some beer, check it out, and watch it. It does give you something to laugh at. But when it comes to a movie with heart and honestly decent and good story elements and really good emotions, then Tommy Boy is the winner in this round. If you want something stupid to really kind of laugh at, that won't really hurt your intelligence any, that you need like a giant Looney Tunes sort of feel going on, Black Sheep is your movie. So for me, I lean more towards Tommy Boy than Black Sheep, but I do recommend watching both of them. It was honestly a lot of fun to make this video, and these are films that I'm very passionate about, especially. And I remember when they came out at a time when I was a kid. I actually seen Tommy Boy in theaters, but I didn't get to see Black Sheep until I was about 6 or 7 years old. I know that's crazy. I was 4. I got to go to the theater at age 4 to go see Tommy Boy. How crazy is that? My parents and my grandfather went. We all went to go watch it, and I can still remember watching it in the theater. It's a film that I really have close to my heart and a lot of sentimental value to. I love Tommy Boy so much that, yeah, I do have it as one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time. The comedy always makes me laugh, the jokes are in the right place, and it's not too over the top. But Black Sheep itself is a little too over the top, but it works because you do like the performances in the film. So, that about does it on this video. Do you guys agree with me? Do you like Black Sheep better than Tommy Boy? Which one is more your speed in the comedy? Tell me in the comments. Always remember, I'm listening.
This is Corey Feldman. Welcome to my studio here in Los Angeles, California. And I just wanted to pop in to say congratulations to Tim. Mr. Tim, I hope everybody's enjoying your videos. He's got some great content, and if you're enjoying his content, make sure you click on that little button right there that says subscribe. Why? Because everything on his channel is Bossa Nova. That's right. Congratulations on your channel, Mr. Tim. I'll be following you, and I know everybody else will too.